The most terrifying aspect of the true story you are about to read is that it does not take place in a dark alleyway or an abandoned warehouse. It takes place in a highly controlled, institutional setting where a vulnerable person went for help. It is the documented, tragic account of Mitrice Richardson, and it forces us to confront a horrifying truth about what can happen when a person experiencing a severe mental health crisis is cast out into the dark, entirely alone. Part 1. The Breakdown at Jeffries. In September of 2009, Mitrice Richardson was a 24-year-old university graduate living in Southern California. She was highly intelligent, vibrant, and held a degree in psychology. But beneath her bright exterior, a severe, undiagnosed mental health crisis was bubbling to the surface. Mitrice was entering a state of severe bipolar mania, experiencing intense delusions and a break from reality. On the evening of September 16th, Mitrice drove her car nearly 40 miles away from her home, up into the wealthy, isolated coastal hills of Malibu. She walked into an upscale, cliffside restaurant called Jeffries. Almost immediately, the staff noticed something was deeply wrong. Mitrice was completely alone, but she was speaking in strange, incoherent sentences, claiming she was from Mars and making erratic hand gestures. She ordered a meal and a drink, totaling $89. When the bill arrived, she admitted she had absolutely no money to pay for it. The restaurant staff, concerned by her bizarre behavior and unable to get her to pay, called the Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department. When the deputies arrived, they looked through her car. They found her purse, her money, her cell phone, and all of her identification locked inside the vehicle. Instead of recognizing that Mitrice was experiencing a severe psychological breakdown, the deputies arrested her for defrauding an innkeeper and possession of a small amount of personal marijuana. They impounded her car with all of her belongings inside, put her in the back of a squad car, and drove her away into the night. Part 2. Released into the black. Mitrice was taken to the Malibu Lost Hills Sheriff's Station. It was a remote police precinct tucked deep inside the rugged, treacherous Santa Monica Mountains. Back home, Mitrice's mother, Lettice Sutton, found out her daughter had been arrested. Lettice immediately called the police station. She expressed intense worry to the deputy on duty, explaining that her daughter was clearly not in her right mind. Lettice explicitly asked the station to hold Mitrice until morning so that family members could drive out to safely collect her. According to police records, the deputy assured the mother that Mitrice would be kept safe at the station until the morning, but they didn't keep her. At approximately 1:25 a.m. on September 17th, the jailer decided to release Mitrice on her own recognizance. The horror of this moment is difficult to fully comprehend. Mitrice Richardson was abruptly opened up to the night. She was experiencing an active, severe psychotic break. She had no money. She had no cell phone to call for help. She had no car, no identification, and no jacket. She was thrust out of the station doors into a pitch-black, mountainous terrain surrounded by deep, pitch-dark canyons, dense brush, and predatory wildlife. She was, in an instant, completely homeless, utterly disoriented, and entirely abandoned by the system that was supposed to protect her. Part 3. Shadows in the Night. What happened next is a chilling puzzle pieced together by a few terrifying late-night sightings. The area surrounding the Lost Hills station is not a brightly lit city street. It is a vast, pitch-black wilderness corridor filled with steep drop-offs, jagged rocks, and hidden ravines. About an hour after Mitrice was released, around 2:30 a.m., a local resident living in a secluded home in Monte Nido, a deeply wooded neighborhood nearby, heard a faint noise outside. The resident looked out their window into the dark backyard. There, standing completely still in the shadows, was a young woman. It was Mitrice. She was resting her face against the window glass, peering inside the dark house, whispering incoherently. The terrified resident, not knowing who she was or what she wanted, called the police to report a prowler. By the time deputies responded to the area, Mitrice had faded back into the thick brush. She had vanished into the canyon. A few hours later, just as the sun was beginning to crack over the mountains, a backyard worker in the same area reported seeing a woman matching Mitrice's description resting on a porch, looking utterly exhausted, shivering, and vacant. When the worker asked if she was okay, she didn't speak. She simply turned around and walked deep into the rugged, unforgiving terrain of Dark Canyon. That was the last time anyone ever saw Mitrice Richardson alive. Part 4. The Silent Search. When Mitrice's family discovered she had been released into the middle of the night with absolutely nothing, a wave of panic ensued. A massive, agonizing search began. For days and then weeks and then months, volunteers, tracking dogs, and helicopters combed through the brutal terrain of the Malibu canyons. Her face was plastered on billboards across California. The thought of what Mitrice was experiencing during those first few days is a profound horror. A young woman, completely detached from reality, starving, dehydrated, hiding in the freezing nighttime temperatures of the canyon brush, terrified of the helicopters circling overhead, completely isolated from everyone who loved her. Because she had been rendered instantly homeless and penniless by the state, she was entirely at the mercy of the elements. Months dragged on. The trail grew cold. The mountains remained completely silent. Part 5, The Discovery in Dark Canyon. Nearly 11 months passed. On August 9, 2010, park rangers were hiking deep within a remote, nearly inaccessible section of Dark Canyon, inspecting an illegal marijuana grow-op hidden in the brush. As they crawled through the dense, tangled vines at the bottom of a steep, rocky ravine, they came across a sight that stopped them dead in their tracks. It was a scattered decomposition site. There, lying in the dirt, were the skeletal remains of Mitrice Richardson. The state of the scene only amplified the horror. Her clothing, the jeans and shirt she had been wearing the night she was arrested, were found pulled off and lying several yards away from her bones. In a move that deeply outraged the family and forensic experts, the sheriff's deputies scrambled to the scene and immediately gathered up her bones before the county coroner could arrive to map the scene properly. Because the recovery was handled so poorly, crucial forensic evidence was destroyed. Part 6, The Haunting Question. The coroner's office ultimately ruled the cause of death as undetermined. Because her body was entirely skeletal by the time she was found, it was impossible to determine if she had died of hypothermia and dehydration, if she had fallen down the treacherous, steep cliffs of the canyon in the dark, or if she had crossed paths with a human predator in the hills. The true terror of Mitrice Richardson's story does not lie in a definitive answer, but in the haunting, unresolvable question of her final hours. It forces us to realize how incredibly thin the line is between a stable, protected life and the absolute terrifying vulnerability of the streets. Within a span of less than 6 hours, a beautiful, educated young woman was transformed from a restaurant patron into an exposed, helpless wanderer, left to perish entirely alone in the dark.